My belief, Mike Rosen speaking on behalf of myself only for a moment. I think we're going to get that gene like in our lifetimes though, and it's just really going to, we're really close, it seems like. And when we do, it's going to open up this whole new kind of ethical question about, well, what do we want to do with it? And do we modify it and kind of kick this addiction out or not? And it's some sci-fi stuff, but I really think we're getting close. And so the genetic piece is a similarity that I know that there's a strong search for on the SUD side, and it's unknown if it's the same one, same makings or not with the behavioral addiction side. Family dysfunction is high in both of these. Chasing the high, we see this over and over. With SUD, it becomes pretty self-explanatory. With gambling, it looks like chasing losses a lot. And so if there's a component of you had a big win and you are feeling good, and then all of a sudden it disappears, you're trying to get it right back again. And so going back the next day or the next several days to get back to where you were. Impulsivity, we've talked about. Strong shame exists in both. The idea of who I am and identity questions, not liking something inherently within me, feeling like there's something wrong with me. And that can, of course, lead to a lot of the depression and even suicidal thoughts that have been referenced already. The 12-step fellowships exist. So there is Gamblers Anonymous. It follows a similar model. It's a 12-step model to the other anonymous programs. So there's some differences though, and these differences are important differences. So with gambling, it's not as easily as detected as substance use. That it can be concealed for a long time. Finances can be hidden and signs of it can be hidden. There's nothing outwardly portraying that shows that you might have a problem. Gamblers will tend to live in this fantasy or dream life. If I hit this, then my whole life will be changed. And there's some truth with it. If you hit the Mega Millions, most people would do something different than they're doing with it, right? It would open up new opportunities. With substance use, that really isn't there. You can't drink enough until all your problems. Well, you can. But that's the idea. But you see that it's this false reality, this false fantasy that can be created. If I can gamble strong enough and play long enough and last long enough, then I'm bound to win. I'm bound to hit the jackpot, and then my life will be changed. I'll be able to reset everything. It's not self-limiting. With gambling, you can't pass out or overdose. You can play all day, every day. With drug use or alcohol use, eventually your body will shut down and reject the toxins. With gambling, it's not limiting. The suicidality rate is much higher, as we've discussed. But that's really an important one. And just because it fits here as a plug, make sure that whenever you're doing work with gamblers, that you are asking questions about suicide and you are asking questions about self-harm and the depressive areas then, because the numbers are so high. I mean, it's such an injustice if we miss that. Hopelessness, kind of in that same vein. Financial, there's financial problems that come with drug use, of course, but with gambling, we see this extreme debt. These areas that loans are being put up, bills are well overdue, houses are being lost, 401s are being cashed in on, children's college funds are being cashed in on. It's just more extreme. The family impact, because of the easiness to hide it, to detect it, there's oftentimes a shock value with the families that when they find out, it's this whole new awareness that they find out because their homes are being foreclosed on, that their cars are being repossessed, and so it starts changing other lives in that aspect too. The social perception, we've talked about this a little bit, but also not only is it more normalized in some ways, but at large, there's still limited awareness of what the resources are for gambling, and this gets into some of the levels of care that we mentioned. and then the 12-step fellowships. I put this here twice, that yeah, it's a similarity that they exist, but it's a difference in that they're really harder to find. They're not nearly as many. And when you go through the difference of the fellowships, you'll have, I mean, with any AA meeting or NA meeting, you might get like different flavors of some of them. With GA chapters, you might get very different flavors of different ones. And it seems that different local chapters might differ from region to region too. Here in Cincinnati, just for numbers, within I think a 25-mile radius, probably from here actually, it's pretty close downtown. There's 8 meetings in a week within 25 miles anyway. So it's just not at all the availability, for AA. There's, how many AA meetings are there in a week? 1,000? I mean, literally, yeah. And you want to go to an AA meeting right now, there's probably one down the hallway in this building. I mean, they're everywhere. Mike, you had a comment?
Well, you went to it, I was gonna give the update.
Please.
I mean, yeah, there's 8 within a 25-mile of I mean, I just hiked in greater Cincinnati and then 25 miles. And there were 8, and then I went to the AA site and I stopped counting at 60. I mean, like you said, there's a lot more, but I didn't want to count beyond 60. But
I'm being literal. I bet it's 1,000. I bet it's 000. So they're everywhere.
Well, what was he comparing that to? You mean GAs available?
GA,
Okay.
GA versus AA. And so it's an important difference, because as clinicians, if we want to recommend it, understand that it might be tougher for somebody to find. It might not be easily accessible. There are online meetings, and those are picking up on interest. COVID really helped, I think, launch online platforms of meetings, and wonderful relationships and fellowships have been formed and created as such. And so GA is certainly in that same availability. What time does this go? 15. Thanks. Okay. Oh, shoot. Oh, shoot. Okay. I knew I wasn't going to get this up. That's all right. Okay, so with triggers, we see some of the same triggers with situations where people, places, things. You want to always make sure that you're assessing for triggers and helping them identify, well, what are certain triggers? And what you'll find a lot of times is that they might need help. That as they're kind of recalling their life in the day of and kind of going through things, we need to have a very tentative ear and paying attention to help them hear what they're saying themselves and start thinking, well, this sounds like it could be a trigger. This sounds like it could be dangerous in some ways. Sometimes they have a hard time naming their own triggers for it. Because of the normalization of it. And that as we touched on, a gambler will often have like a preferred style. And this is interesting. Maybe I should put this as a difference. When we're doing substance use work, a lot of it looks like abstinence-based. There's certainly a trend in place for harm reduction, but a lot of times we start off by saying, if you are using an opioid, using alcohol is also a bad idea. And using cocaine is also a bad idea. And so it's kind of like the stop one, stop all mentality. With gambling addiction, it doesn't necessarily seem to be the same thing. That there's a number of gamblers that they have their preferred style. And so maybe they play poker, and maybe the slot machines really aren't that much of a trigger or much of an issue for them. And so it's interesting as clinicians as we kind of morph our understanding too about what harm reduction looks like for this gambling population.
I would be inclined to think eventually if that's their drug of choice, just like.
Well, you're right, and that's in there, but most gamblers, from my experiences, anecdotal, most of the people that I've worked with will have kind of that decision tree about, well, do I want to stop everything or just a little? Most of them will say, I don't want to stop forever. I want to learn how to kind of get back, to where I was when I could control it before I got the problem. Now we hear that all the time, right? With substance use too. And so an effective strategy though, because of your point, might be, well, to start with, let's arrest it. Let's kind of put a hold on it for a little bit. a lot of people, as they're successful in doing that, kind of lose the interest in going back at all then. There might be a Monte Carlo night at a bachelor party, or there might be, something going on where they say, I want to get to a place where I'd be able to attend this. I think we'll probably do some VIP or the VEP, the VEP voluntary exclusion program. I think we'll talk about that this afternoon some, but there are some ways to put controls up to help put barriers between venues and people. But as a treatment intervention, just kind of for thinking that a lot of time people will start with this idea of harm reduction. That's where they want to go. And it's up to us to kind of help them understand, well, what does that look like in practical terms? Knowing that there are some risks to it. But there are people who can manage both. They can go through life not playing poker anymore and staying away from the poker tables altogether, but doing other forms and not really have issue with it. So it's interesting because they exist, and some of the same caution lights that are going off in your head now, they were mine too, and it took me a while to understand how does this work. So that's one of the differences between the two, this behavioral addiction and substance use. I want to get onto some screens. Warning signs. This is an important one, I guess. Oftentimes you want to ask about their first big win. You'll find that people remember this big win, something, at the time they were 12 and they bought a pool tab for a quarter at the church festival, and they won $12 on it. And I mean, that's a big win for a 12-year-old, right? Most people will remember that big win. They buy $1 scratch off and they get $50 back. They put $5 in the slot machine and they hit $1,100. I mean, there's something that's imprinting on that first big win, and it becomes significant then as a point of as a reference in their timeline. So you want to make sure that you're assessing for that. It can become this predictor in that, well, this was easy, shoot, and I'll do it again. I'll do it again and again. Well, I missed that time, but I'll get it again. And you can see the repetition starting then. Earlier onset, of course, much with many of our conditions that we work with, the earlier in onset, then the more likely for it to convert later into a problem. I'm going to skip down a little bit to the cultural community acceptance and attitudes. This is certainly one too that we've touched on a couple of times, but just to point it out that there are different cultures that have higher prevalences of gambling disorders then, and it's something that we should be aware of, and just understanding like what was the role of what was gambling like in your family growing up, and what did it mean to you, and the normalization of it and the acceptance of it of sorts. More risk factors here to touch on, just that it can be falsely viewed as a way to finance substance use. We talked about that a little bit. So the relationship between there. When you're using substances, when somebody's using substances, it can lead to poor judgment in gambling activities. The casinos, I think, probably statewide, Mike, pushed for free alcohol when they came on board. That was something that they wanted to comp to all gamblers. And
yeah, because that's normalized in other places, but you can't, maybe you can know somebody, but you should not be given free alcohol at Ohio casinos or casinos. We have that at Ohio.
But that was something that kind of had to get some no, nice try kind of talking to, because of that idea that the more that the people are drinking, the looser they're going to feel, the higher risk they might be taken. So we know that there is that poor judgment that can lead to increased gambling activities.
That happens in other states,
Oh, yeah.
free alcohol?
Yeah, oh, yeah. I thought that was seen in all casinos. I was happy to hear that's not true in Ohio.
So Ohio blocks it, yeah.
Oh, you can't do that?
No.
Vegas
For the casinos?
City.
I'm going back maybe 10 years.
Well, when they first opened, I think there was some penalties for it, that they started doing it when they opened and they got fined. Yeah.
That's shocking.
You got a friend who knows someone. All right, so just some warning signs. These come from a lot of family members, actually. So family members will tell you some things that they're seeing and that they're noticing, and just things that we as clinicians should be aware of and looking out for. Things like spending more money than was intended, they're out longer or spending more than they wanted to, exaggerating their wins or losses or understating the losses, lying about the frequency and the amount spent, where they were, hiding signs of their betting, hobbies become replaced, not having enough money for necessities. So really putting the priority more on this new value. Having overdue bills, getting cash advances or maxing out credit cards, getting more credit cards, needing to borrow money more, selling property, pawning items. Talking about it more, checking it more, logged in to the sites, the apps more. High risk investments and on and on. Okay, so I'm gonna. 10 minutes.
Yeah.
I want to do a quick overview then of some screening tools. I chose these for a certain reason, in a sequence that will show that there's a lot of different tools that are on the market today. And a lot of the tools in the market that actually are still in use are decades old. And what it illustrates, though, is that the sampling at the time of their production was based on information to the best that they knew, on models that we've talked about, on ideas that this seems to be like. And so you'll see that different models here, like, for example, the first one, the brief biosocial gambling screen. This is a brief screen that we can use and that many places do use. It's not a bad screen. It's a short 3-item screen that looks at, withdrawal, deception, need for financial help. I think I put a picture of it here. So it asks, in the last 12 months, have you become restless, irritable, or anxious when trying to cut down or stop? Yes or no? Have you tried to keep your family or friends from knowing how much you gamble? Yes or no? Have you had financial troubles? Again, following the withdrawal, deception, and the need for financial help. So this screen, again, it's not a bad one to start with, but you can see how it differs from other screens, other brief screens that are there. There's one called the NODS clip, and its focus, I didn't put them all up here, but its focus is on loss of control, the C, lying, and preoccupation. There's a NODS perk. These are short versions of a longer one, but their focus here is the preoccupation, escape, risk relationships, chasing, the lie bet, picking up on deception, picking up on loss of control. So you can see, though, that these different screens are targeting different criteria. Well, let me pause there and just, why would there be such a variation? What does that mean to us as clinicians? Which one is best?
You said with the screening tools?
Yep, you can see each of these screening tools. These are short ones, and they're targeting different criteria of the DSM. Okay, well, let me hold your attention for one more minute then, and we'll go to some longer ones, and we'll start answering it as we go forward.
Now, I thought the SOGS was the industry standard.
Well, so the SOGS is a longer one. And so you get, many places use the SOGS, and actually I put SOGS up here. SOGS, you'll get more questions. Some of them score, some of them don't. And at the end of the SOGS, though, you'll have more of an understanding, a more comprehensive piece with it, right? The SOGS isn't the longest one either, though. This NODS, the clips and the perk are parts of the NODS. There's a Canadian Problem Gambling Index. There's the 20 questions of Gamblers Anonymous. You get more questions saying, well, what more about? Okay, filling in some of the more questions. None of them are bad ones. And I think, what we find, and then there's other ones. I just listed other ones up here. The Massachusetts Gambling Screen, the DIGS, the GamToms, the Victorian Gambling Screen, the 8 screen. Again, if you look up each of these individually, you'll find side by side, they look very different from one another. You'll find numbers of their publication that start with 198, some of them. These are from the 80s, guys, some of them. And they're still in use, and it's not wrong that they're still in use. It's just understanding as clinicians, what are they targeting? That they're not targeting the whole picture. And that if you're coming from a stance that says, I want to find the best screen, we as a room are going to come up with a lot of different answers. Based on, well, what do we think? How do we find it? And this is what's important as clinicians and understand, well, what tool do we use it? When are you supposed to? Who gives it? Where do you do it? All these questions are common questions. Because again, our agencies will tell us a lot of times, this is how you're doing it. And so do it that way, I guess. But but if you boil it down and say, well, is this the best? And does this capture it? Over and over and over, regardless of whatever you use or whenever or whoever's doing it or wherever, any of that. Plan on rescreening. And this point, I can't bold high, strong enough. When you first meet somebody, you'll get some responses, and they're likely going to be incomplete because this whole field right now is incomplete. And what we notice is that if somebody says, no, I don't gamble, understand there's 5 different definitions of gambling on that first slide. So what are we even talking about? And if you're in an agency that says our screening tool or our assessment tool, is 1,000 questions long, and you need to find a place to ask these 16 questions of the SOGs, well, 3 questions is easier than 16 of the BBGS, and 2 questions of the live bet is even easier than 3. And when you're trying to fit it into the middle of, well, what does CARF say we need to ask? And what does Joint Commission say we need to ask? And what does OMA say that we need to ask? And what do the funders say that we need to ask? You get this long write-up of questions that really don't go well together. And now you're being asked to put some gambling questions in there. And they just don't really fit nicely. So again, whatever the right way is, it has to land on this. Plan to do it over. And as you get the relationship and you get the rapport, that's really where it comes out more organically. But if you leave here with one thing, this is it. Don't take no for an answer, and don't take yes for an answer either. That this first screening is so important just to build a competence in saying, I know how to ask a gambling question. Let that be your goal, that we've asked them questions, that we've started connecting, and then plan on rescreening and re-asking them again and again and again. Not to the point where it's draining and dulling, but really at the point of understanding and compassion, because all this is woven in everything that we do. If a behavior is addictive, if a behavior can be addictive, then we have to know, well, what else is contributing to that from that pathways model, right? Anybody can develop a behavioral addiction according to that pathways model. Anybody then, and then people with other conditions going on, maybe while they're presenting to you anyway, is going to complicate that and make them more likely to have some predisposition to those type of behaviors. So one of the things that where we are right now in our field really lays on, we don't do a good enough job screening. Plain and simple. And that we know that, as Mike showed us so clearly, that the gambling is up all throughout Ohio. And the calls are up. These are the ones saying, I want to talk to somebody, but there's so many more that are saying, I don't even know if this is a problem. Yeah, I win some, I lose some, I have some consequences, but we need to, on the early end, catch it sooner. And really in practice talking about money, because that can be a hard discussion sometimes. We're taught you don't ask about money, right? You let them do their finances. But as clinicians, we need to find a comfort with that. How much do you play with? How much do you have in savings? What did your saving look like a year ago compared to today? What are your financial goals? Does that make sense? Plan on rescreening, guys. So again, whatever tool you use, and I mean it, I put these all in your slides. Print them out, go play with them. See which ones feel best and you like. The SOGs is a common one. What a lot of places do is, if it's on that very first day of sliding some questions into the first 1,000 that we're asking, it might be that BBGS followed up later with the SOGs. There's no right or wrong way other than saying I'm asking about it and I'm learning about it, and I want you to talk openly about it.
What has the highest validity?
It depends who you ask. I would say if you Google each of these, you'll find conditions of why their validities are either outdated, disproven, or challenged. Okay. And again, so does it mean that none of them should be used and they're all no, but it means that at the point of time when they were produced, that we still as an industry don't have a gold standard for them. And I think, and honestly, I kind of like it that way. I think it gives us a permission to kind of think outside the box. To look at the bigger picture then. Go ahead and back.
Just how the health improvements. Help me figure out who is for, like the person who's telling me. Hey, I go to the same every month and I'm spending half my paycheck every week. Would that indicate some marketing or something?
Well, yes, I would say that's a great place to start. But remember when in the framework of forming our research right now, what we know about behavioral addictions. In the framework, there was the consensus that we have to have something that causes a problem for a long time. It's having negative effects for a long time. Those are the two criteria then. And so I think that I would run those same questions. You're going every day, you're spending half your paycheck. Is that a problem? How long have you been doing it?
But I mean, would you choose one of those over the other?
Oh, I'm sorry. Well, so these are screens. And so the purpose of any screen is to start, to rule out, right? So then you want to get into the fuller assessment. And through the assessment, then it's where you're really kind of diving into more of the clinical picture.
I mean, of those ones that you put up with, they all say something different, so.
They all screen for something different. And so they'll miss things. And so they're great tools for ruling out. And that's really the risk is that if you
Wait,
say,
she's asking you if the client presents a certain way, do you tend to use one screening tool over another?
Is that what you want to do? Yeah.
well, so
I wondered, you will also be on the panel that occurs after lunch. So whether that could be, we take that sort of at the beginning of that second. So
that's a great point.